Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I am your host, Ed Dentzel. Welcome to the show on this what was a beautiful but cold and chilly Tuesday in Madeira Beach, Florida. Winter is definitely here. I mean, can you imagine? I actually had to put a long sleeve shirt on in my apartment today. I know, it's just crazy down here. Crazy winter. I hope you can hear the sarcasm. Before I get started today, I want to remind you can find my books at Amazon.com. I'll talk about them at the end of the show as well. You can download them to your Kindle in a matter of moments. And during the show, you can email me at edwarddentzel@reagan.com. Or you can follow me on Twitter and tweet me during the show. Dentzel Domain, all one word, no space in between. Let's get right to it. There's a story that I've been waiting to talk about simply because I wanted to get it right. I thought there were some good points to be made, even though I'm going to go off on a tangent a little bit different from what this guy did in the article. But it really struck me as true, and I needed to wait to write down my notes in a right way so I understood them and so I can make you understand them. Because sometimes I'm scribbling notes down and I'll be done and I'll look at it and like, what was I thinking again? And then I'll have to go through them again. That happens quite often. Do a lot of brainstorming when I do this show. So I want to get it right. And the article comes from National Review, and the date on it was actually last Thursday. And it was by John O'Sullivan, who I'm thinking that I met on the National Review cruise 3 years ago. I think he was on it. I think I met him, I think. And the title of the article is Populist Parties Rising Because Conservative Parties Have Failed. Now, any type of article that has that as the title is going to get my attention, no matter if it's on National Review or any other site. I think that's going to, if it's a decently long article like this one is, then I know that there's going to be some really juicy stuff in it, stuff that I'm going to agree with, some that I'm going to disagree with, that I'm going to be able to bring to you. But a topic such as this is so important that I want to make sure I get it right. So if you don't know this, sometimes I will run across an article and I won't talk to you about it that day. And not because I don't get to it, just because I don't think I've peeled back the onion enough to get to the real meat of it, to mix cliches in there. I hate doing that. And I want to make sure when I cover a topic like this that I get it right, because as I've told you, when I come to this show, I do it from a standpoint of people coming to politics for the first time. I want to make a good first impression for new people. And not necessarily new people who are well-versed in conservatism, but just new people to politics, period. I don't care if you're a teenager, a person who has been blowing off politics for years because it's too confrontational, too divisive. They hate politicians. They hate it coming up in public conversations. And in fact, I was talking to a friend of mine just recently, and she was telling me how she just stays out of the entire thing. And we had a little back and forth about that just recently. But I realize a lot of those people eventually do change their mind. And if they happen across my show, then I want to make sure that I don't turn them off and make them go back to ignoring it again. Let's put it this way. And I also think of myself as a teacher in this show. There's a couple points to be made about this article I think that are important. First of all, most of the article concerns Europe and the European parties, from France to Belgium, Italy, Switzerland, and how what they would call conservative parties. Now, in the American definition of conservative is somewhat different from your European definition of conservative. As I've told you, our brand of conservatism, as far as being a force in national politics, really only exists in the United States. Over there, you're not going to hear too many people who call themselves conservatives talk about the dismantling of the socialist healthcare systems they have in all these countries. You're not going to hear him talk about that. Not even Margaret Thatcher talked about that when she was Prime Minister of England 30 years ago. Just not going to happen. And they have many different attitudes than we do. Although they're closer to us than maybe they are to your flaming, raging, lefty kook liberal in the United States. But not by much. Let's put it that way. But John O'Sullivan is making the point in here that these populist parties in Europe have risen because conservative parties have forgotten some of their constituents. That these parties changed into a group where they were just telling people, we can manage the affairs of the government just better than the left. And we'll do that by specializing in handling the economy of our country. Thus, they were leaving open what John O'Sullivan would say is those principles, those values that got those political parties started in the first place, which was the pride in the country, traditional values, patriotism, and what we would call in the United States some social issues regarding abortion, capital punishment, stuff like that. And he's right about that. As far as I understand, and of course, as far as I understand European politics, I think he's right. Now, more recently, as he points out, the reason that some of these far right-wing parties, he calls them populist parties, have risen, is the issue of immigration, because over there, a lot of those conservative parties have ignored what is going on with immigration. Just like a lot of Americans would say that many conservatives have ignored immigration in the United States, only giving it lip service. And hence the rise of a guy like Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is eventually mentioned in this article. Toward the end, though. Like I said, this is not... this is only like a 1/5 American article, 4/5 Europe. But what John O'Sullivan doesn't say or doesn't point out enough to me is that these parties that have risen, these populist parties, as he wants to call them, that have risen, although they have become known in Europe and these different countries, and they do get votes, and they do hold positions within Parliament. And I'm not going to get into the parliamentary system compared to ours. That's way too confusing. Because we know in a lot of these countries, there are like 5 or 6, 7 different popular political parties. But what happens is the votes end up getting split. What we could call, quote unquote, the conservative vote ends up getting split between 2 or 3 different parties. And it allows the left in those countries to hold on, to continue to hang on, even though the left should be losing in some of these countries. And see, that's what I'm afraid of in the United States. This is one of the reasons that I'm against a third party, first of all. And I haven't talked about that recently, but that's a position of mine. What he doesn't mention, though, or like I said before, he kind of glosses over, is that these parties have gotten to a point, I think, where they have reached maximum popularity. Meaning they're not necessarily, maybe because of what goes on with the Syrian refugee issue going on in Europe, yes. But there aren't a lot of people. It's not like Marine Le Pen's party in France is going to take over the more popular conservative party in that country. It just hasn't happened. And Le Pen's have been around for decades. It's just not going to happen. And so you continue to have this fracture on the right. Now, Now, how does this relate to the United States? Well, we have an issue now, and as we know about Donald Trump and his rise, I even think Donald Trump himself, if he were to be asked point blank about this, what has made you so popular? I would say that immigration, and I think that that's where he's going. He's already hit Ted Cruz there and Marco Rubio and the rest of them, and he can do that because he doesn't have a political record like they do. And some of them have a pretty shaky immigration record. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. And even Ted Cruz, who probably is the most conservative of all the candidates, has gotten caught up in this at least a little bit. But see, there's a problem with this. And basing even in Europe, where they're basing it on immigration, that problem is here as well regarding that. See, as I've been talking about it for a few months now, my fear has been that conservatism is slowly becoming a one-issue ideology, where any topic that comes up, it seems that there's going to be a lot of people out there that say, oh, all we have to do is fix immigration and it'll be worked out. The problem we're having with the economy in the United States, if we could just immigration, it'll be fixed. Problem with social issues, with the expansion of the welfare state and food stamps and Medicare and Medicaid. Hey, we get the immigration problem. We get kick all these illegals out of here, and we build that wall. That's going to get fixed too. National security. We get the immigration fixed. That's going to take care of most of the problem. It's this one solution for all of it. That's the kind of feeling that I get. And you know what I start thinking about to get outside the realm of politics? I start thinking about Kentucky Fried Chicken, KFC. I know that may seem funny to you, but as I've told you, I'm not going to be the insider guy on Red State Talk Radio. I'm not going to be the funniest. I'm just going to try to be the most interesting. And so I come up with these analogies. You ever been to KFC? I haven't been to one in years. Do they still have sporks there? Do you know what a spork is? It's a combination fork and spoon, and they're plastic there. So you get this spork and a plastic knife if you get utensils at KFC. Now, why do they do that? Probably keeps everything nice and cheap. They don't have to have 3 utensils, only 2. And that, when you have all the KFCs in the United States and the world, that you can save quite a bit of money if you only have 2 utensils instead of 3. And they also can get away with that because KFC isn't exactly a place where you go in and you use your utensils a lot. It's a place where you eat with your hands. And it's still funny to me that after all these years of humans on Earth, we still do, if evolution, if you believe in that sort of thing, that we still do eat with our hands, which is it's fascinating to me. And the spork is fine at KFC. You try using a spork if you go to Applebee's. And maybe to put it another way, if you've never seen utensils before and you see a spork, you think it's absolutely the most coolest thing in the world. Oh, look, you can eat your salad with this, but then you can eat your soup with it too. Oh, okay, I got, scoop out it with the spoon part and stab that salad with the fork part. And that makes all the sense in the world until you actually see a fork and a spoon. And then what do people usually do? They say, well, yeah, put that spork to the side. I'm just going to use the real fork for the salad because it works better. And I'm going to use the real spoon for the soup because you can get more in your spoon and you can't get as much on the spork. Immigration to me, when it comes to politics in the United States, has become a spork. It seems like the greatest invention in the world until you actually start looking at the individual topics and the true arguments in each problem. And then immigration starts to take a back seat. And this is the main reason I worry about Donald Trump, outside of me not liking him as a guy. This one-size-fits-all, one-utensil-fits-all stuff can only go so far, as these third-party, fourth-party, fifth-party organizations in Europe are finding. So you rapidly get a lot of people at the beginning when you start talking about a topic, but after that, it's just stragglers, little by little, to the point where the people who are dying who are part of your party and the people joining your party are just about the same. So you stay right at that same level. It's just never enough. This one issue thinking is not enough to keep building, keep maturing, keep spreading. It's not. Why? Because people end up reading other things. They end up finding out that, well, yeah, I joined for immigration, but you know what? That immigration argument for the economy, it kind of works, but you know what's a better argument? Smaller government, better tax system, lower regulations. Immigration, don't get me wrong, immigration's part of it, but there are some other issues that have much more of an impact on whether the economy is good in the United States than immigration. Not to say immigration is not important. Likewise with social issues. Well, yeah, we probably could do something about all these illegitimate kids if we could go. But you know what? There's a lot of true American citizens who are having kids without being married too. And most of the women that are getting abortions in the United States, you know what? A huge percentage of them, they're American citizens. And those guys who aren't paying their child support, a huge majority of them are not American or are American citizens. So immigration, although it might fix it a little bit, wouldn't be as much of a solution as you think. And then you go over to national security issues, and we're all worried about Syrians or members of ISIS sneaking into this country, which is a real possibility. The only problem is we can't find many examples of that. We can't. In fact, when the issue is the San Bernardino shooting, those people didn't sneak in here. They might have lied, and the government did their checks. The government's checks just weren't good enough. That's different than immigration. It's different. Likewise with September 11th. Guys didn't sneak in here. Didn't have to, they didn't swim across the river to get here. They had some forged documents, but some of them were here legally too. Although I understand the immigration issue regarding national security could mean something. So when you start breaking them down and really start looking at what the three big issues in politics overall are, you see that the economic issues, the social issues, the military issues, they have their own fixes, and the main fix is not immigration. And dare I say it, I think the reason that immigration has become popular is because it's easy to understand. I'm just not so sure it works in practice. I'm against illegal immigration because I believe in the laws of the United States. That's what I continue to say about it. I don't say the national security issue. I don't bring up the economic issue. I don't bring up the social issue. I just know what I think the definition of a country is, and a country controls its borders no matter if the people coming are trying to illegally come in look like Brad Pitt and the Swedish bikini team, or are nuclear physicists or people who can cure cancer. My attitude is that's the law, and those people can't get in either. I'm not so sure how many people feel that way about it. So, dare I say it, that the reason I think a lot of people are against immigration is because they think it'll fix everything, like it's a magic bullet, and it's not. Just like the spork is not the magic bullet for eating food in the United States. It's a convenience. It's there because it's a cost-cutting measure. And the restaurant knows what kind of restaurant it itself is, and it knows that most people, when they go in there, they eat with their hands anyway, but just in case, we'll throw out a couple utensils out there, and just in case somebody needs one for some reason. But we're surely not going to put a regular spoon and a regular fork. Overall, that would just be too expensive for us. You would not want to walk into a KFC and think that could work everywhere. Certainly wouldn't work at a steak restaurant. What, Lone Star Steakhouse? Was there the Lone Star? Yeah, Lone Star Steakhouse. The spork's not going to work there, even though it may work at KFC. That's what I'm worried about regarding immigration and how we continue to be fascinated with it. I also think that that's the reason that in Donald Trump's case, that he's been able to attract people who, what I would say, aren't the most sophisticated political people. Is because a one-size-fits-all type of solution is easy to understand. Whereas the solutions to real political problems in the United States, each of those divisions that I talked about, the economic, the social issues, and the foreign policy issues, to fix them, you have to understand about them and understand how everything works outside of immigration. You know, you just, for example, if you want to know why a person, when he jumps out of a window, hits the ground at a certain speed, you just can't, you can maybe eye it up and guesstimate, but no, you actually have to do some physics calculations to figure that out. Right? And it seems to me there are too many people who are getting involved in the political process that just kind of want to eye it up and make a guess. And their guess is immigration. Now, there's a whole other part of this, and this is where I would go calling it political isolationism, is that just recently I did, and this is the reason that I'm also against third parties and these people who say that we should put social issues to the side, because he touches, John O'Sullivan in this article touches upon that as well. Just recently I was talking about P.J. O'Rourke and how he hates social issues. Libertarian politicians, they just need to put those things to the side. Well, when he's talking about that, he is talking about the right, and I know that P.J. O'Rourke is no lefty. But he calls the social issues stupid and that the Republican Party should get away from them. Well, if the Republican Party did that, what you would see in Europe would happen here. You would see other groups popping up, the pro-life party, the the pro-capital punishment party, on and on and on. That would happen. And I would also remind P.J. O'Rourke and all those other people who want to kick social issues out of the right side of politics is that the left never does that. The left views its principles as all one big ball of goodness. You're never going to get a liberal politician out there who's not going to talk about abortion. So is P.J. O'Rourke and others, are they saying that if the left talks about abortion, that we should just forget it? Shouldn't respond at all? It comes up in a debate, and that Democrat politician starts talking about a woman's right to choose, on and on and on, and then the Republican, the conservative is just supposed to stand there and say nothing. Remember, we have to talk about it because they talk about it. Likewise, there are probably topics they want to avoid, But they have to talk about it because we talk about it. You don't get to pick and choose your own topics. Now, maybe Hillary Clinton does at a Democrat debate. But this feels like the isolationists who think that, well, we'll just stay out of the Middle East, everything will be fine. It's none of our business. Well, somebody's going to make it their business, and now we see who that is, Russia and others. Likewise, in politics, you stay away from a topic, somebody is going to seize upon it because they believe it's important. And your enemy sometimes dictates what you are going to do. So if they're going to talk about social issues, and the truth is, the left loves social issues. They love talking about abortion. What do you think the whole Sandra and contraception and what people do within the privacy of their own homes, all of those kinds of topics. They love that stuff. Why? Because they think they can win. And they would win if we didn't talk about it as well. This is not a vacuum, PJ O'Rourke and the rest of you out there. You don't hear anybody on the left saying, you know what, we just got to put those social issues to the side. I mean, that's just, keep doing that. All we're doing is turning people off. But PJ O'Rourke is expressing what the parties in Europe have done for decades and have lost constituents. In fact, within the article in National Review by John O'Sullivan, he talks about this word economism. Economism. E-C-O-N-O-N-I-S-M. It was a word created by Karl Marx, by the way, regarding political discourse that concentrates only on the economic and none of the social issues that concern a country. They're so wrapped up in that one particular group of that triad that I mentioned earlier, the economic issues, the social issues, the foreign policy / military issues. They're so wrapped up in that economic part of it, they forget they don't want to deal with the others. And that's exactly where those third parties have jumped in Europe. And this is the exact reason, as a conservative, I've been talking about for months, that as we continue to talk more and more about immigration, more and more people believing that it's a magic bullet, we are, in turn, opening ourselves up the opposite way. So imagine this. We have, in the last so many years, too many years, we've had too many Republican politicians who have ignored the immigrant question and doing something serious about it. Wishy-washy, Dream Act, amnesty. And so, doing that, they opened up the door for somebody like a Donald Trump. That's what happened. But now that so many conservatives are jumping the opposite direction and embracing immigration so heavily, that you're now opening up a door on the other side for those people who don't believe in this one size fits all, this magic bullet that I keep calling it. Who don't believe that immigration, even though they are for a good, solid immigration policy with laws that are followed and everything, they think that Trump and others have taken it too far. And I can see it on my Twitter feed. People taking this immigration thing too far, the opposite direction. And so that then opens up another door over here, and it's just fracture after fracture after fracture. And that's why I've tried to tell you that conservatism needs to be a mixture of all of that. It needs to be a mixture of economics, needs to be a mixture of social issues, needs to be a mixture of military, foreign policy issues. Now, depending what the mix is, depending on what's going on in the world. I don't want to try to say it's 33%, 33%, 33%. It depends. But it all needs to be talked about, and immigration is not going to fix any one of those by itself. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.
Red State Talk Radio. Lock it in and rip the knob off.
I know you're watching, so pay attention. You hate my freedom, my religion, and my country. You hate me for speaking my mind. You try to control me with violence and intimidation. You think you can muzzle me with fear? Don't ever confuse me for my politicians or my media. I am an American, free-born and free-bred, and I will call you out for who you are. An Islamic extremist who would kill me for my beliefs. You don't intimidate me. My freedom is more powerful than anything you can possibly do, and I will never, never surrender my rights to your terror. I will say what I think, worship according to my beliefs, and raise my children how I see fit, and I defend it all with the Second Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. I cower to no one, because I am the National Rifle Association of America, and I am freedom's safest place.
This is Donna Fiducia. For 26 years, I was a member of the mainstream media, most recently as an anchor at the Fox News Channel. Ladies and gentlemen, the mainstream media has failed you miserably. Red State Talk Radio will not fail you. Tune into Red State Talk Radio at redstatetalkradio.com, the dominant force in conservative internet talk radio.
I lost my brother Frank in the Battle of Iwo Jima.
He served on 4 combat tours.
In Vietnam,
In Iraq.
Afghanistan.
There's a life that was lost behind that pin.
I put it on for my wife,
For my husband,
My brother.
my dad.
My son.
We wear it because we honor those that we lost.
To learn more about the stories behind the Gold Star Pins, visit goldstarpins.org.
This is Jeff Carlisi from the Band 38 Special. You're listening to Red State Talk Radio. Lock it in and rip the knob off.
Back at the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I want to continue to talk about John O'Sullivan's article from last week at National Review. Just a couple more points, and then we'll move on to a couple newer items. If you don't know, the newest episode, the first episode for season 15 of the show Mayday, came out yesterday. And that's a show that I'm fascinated with. It has all the episodes concern, or most of the episodes concern, plane crashes. Plane crashes, the investigation behind them, why they occurred. And this is about plane crashes going back to the 1950s. Some of the ones you've probably heard about. Some of them are a little bit more obscure. But I'm fascinated with that topic. And this show's in its 15th season. That just shows you how popular it is. And I think it's on the National Geographic channel. I watched it on YouTube. But in this most recent issue or episode, plane crashes, hits the ground, hits the runway going too fast, too steep, breaks the landing gear, slides off the runway, a bunch of people get killed. And what the investigators discover is that the pilot was what they call fixated, and it's on landing, was so worried about his height, he was coming in, first of all, he's coming in too high to the runway in the first place. They saw this from both the cockpit voice recorder and on the flight data recorder, that he became so fixated on getting the plane onto the ground that he didn't pay attention to how fast he was going, and he didn't pay attention to his rate of descent. And so they talked a little bit about this word fixation that is very common among humans when we get into tight spots, we're nervous, and some other people might call it tunnel vision. This is, when I heard that and I watched that episode, this is what I thought of regarding immigration. Too many conservatives have become fixated on immigration. Now, that's not to say, for example, the episode, there's nothing wrong, of course, with the pilot wanting to land the plane. That's what he's supposed to do. And there's nothing wrong with him wanting to put the plane down on its wheels and save everybody. There's nothing wrong with any of that. That's what he's supposed to do. But when he becomes so fixated on that and ignores what some of his instruments are telling him, and in this case, what the co-pilot was telling him, there were sirens, warnings going off, pull up, the computer was telling the pilot, didn't want to do it. Co-pilot tried to tell him, we need to go around, we're too fast, pilot wanted to put the thing on the ground. Well, if you want to put the plane on the ground too badly, it gets people killed. And likewise, when you want to embrace immigration so much and believing that it's the fix for everything, that you leave yourself open in all sorts of other ways. Now, politics, I don't know if that's necessarily going to get any people killed, but it's certainly going to cause you to become more irrelevant. It just doesn't seem to me that at this point anybody's willing to take a look around regarding this topic and say, yes, it's important, but man, does it seem like we've gotten a little crazy regarding it. Does it? Now, see, I would say in Donald Trump's case, the reason he continued to beat it was first because he saw an opening. That's what he does. He's a business guy. He sees opportunities. But now, all these months later, that he's still kind of this one-note thing, and it may be the reason that his popularity hasn't continued to grow, is that he never takes a breath, looks up for a second and says, well, maybe I need to show some expertise in other areas. You know why? Because he also thinks that immigration is going to cure all our problems. And I think that he's also shown a lack of desire to understand these other topics as deeply as will be needed. Why? He just thinks immigration is going to fix all of it. Not saying he's not going to do other things, but that's just one guy. I would expect your average person who's not running for office to take a look around. He needs votes. This is the way he's going to end up trying to get them. Nobody else out there, the voters aren't trying to get votes. They're the ones who are going to vote. So it seems to me that they should be studying the issues a little bit more. Like I'm telling you. Well, I'm just not sure that immigration... Yeah, I'm for solid borders and not letting illegals in and everything, but is it really going to fix this? Is it really going to fix the economics of the United States? And I know Trump's brought out a tax plan and this plan and that plan, but they surely are not the centerpieces. It's what I hate about all this. And I know that there are other people who are doing shows that could talk about immigration and how important it is and all the statistics for hours on their shows. And they're absolutely fixated on it. I'm not. I see immigration as one particular issue that will solve just a few particular problems in the United States. And on top of it, I believe in following whatever current United States law is. Whether it hurts the economy or not, or whether it hurts foreign policy or not, or whether it hurts social issues or not. If the United States was perfect, I'd still want strong immigration laws. I'm not so sure those other people think that way. See that? There is a difference there. So immigration, the spork of politics. Let's move on to something else. I hope I did a fine job on that topic for today. Just have to be versed. You have to be versatile. You have to be versatile on this. I think that's the only way that a Republican has any hopes of winning the White House this year, is to be diverse. Donald Trump is not right. And when I say diverse, I mean diverse on the topics. Giving all sorts of different issues, the important issues, equal time. Because there's a lot of them. But too many people think, well, he's talked about immigration, so that's his version of talking about the economy, the social issues, and the foreign policy. All he has to talk about immigration, and he's covered it all. And that's crazy. It's crazy. Let's move on to something else. Something else that I'm probably going to also be out of step with my fellow conservatives, and I talked about Bill Clinton last week. I want you to think about something. He was asked, this comes from the Weekly Standard, he was somewhere and he was asked about, should his, the reporter, to watch the video, asks him the question somewhat reluctantly. She starts the question with, I gotta ask. Meaning, she's being pressured by, when somebody says that, person feels like they're being pressured by somebody else to do it. It's the first thing I think of. And Bill Clinton seemed flustered by the comment, and then he gave a response which was somewhat of a non sequitur, which means his answer didn't have anything to do with the question. I'm not sure if he didn't hear, I don't know. Blowing it off, I don't know. But I want to ask you a real question regarding this. Being that, once again, so many conservatives seem so happy that some people are giving Hillary Clinton this, hard time about this double standard that she has regarding believing women who are raped. Given that she says all women who are raped should be believed, whether she was the one who tried to demonize all of these women who brought these allegations against her husband. But I want to ask you something. This is the only question that matters. And I want you to think about this answer really, really hard. Don't answer me. I know I can't hear you. But don't answer me within a second. I want you to think about this question give me 10 seconds. Will Bill's sex life keep Hillary from the White House? By giving her a hard time about it, do you think that this is going to keep her from the White House? To keep her from getting elected? See, I don't. I know that she's a hypocrite regarding it. I just don't think people care. I think that I've told you, there are 55 million people who are going to vote for Hillary Clinton if she gets the nomination in November. There's not a thing that we can do about it. So there's already, we know, 55 million people in the United States, all legal votes, all legal citizens who are going to vote for her. And guess what? Those 55 million people do not care what her husband did. Or if they do care, they're just willing to look past it. Yeah, he's a scoundrel. Big deal. Big deal. So I'm asking you again, is that a good argument when you already know that 55 million people don't care? When you put it in that context, doesn't quite seem to be as powerful of a topic, does it? Does it? Because once again, this kind of feels to me like the immigration thing. Well, if we can hit them hard on immigration, man, we're just going to win this election. Well, now I think some of us are already convincing ourselves, not me, I use the us as in conservatives, not me personally, are thinking, well, this is the way to stop Hillary Clinton. Show that she's this double standard regarding the war on women. And then it goes back to what I said last week. If you want to talk about the war on women, I have nothing against that. I think that's a worthy topic, but shouldn't we be talking it in a broader context of the United States and outside of Hillary Clinton? Shouldn't we just be talking about what all Democrats have been doing to women? What Democrat women have been doing to other Democrat women? What Democrat men have been doing to Democrat women? Because that's what's going on in these cities where Democrats live. A lot of Democrat on Democrat crime out there, with a lot of those Democrat victims being women. And seems to me that would be a better argument than keeping it to Bill Clinton. Because, see, there's a point where it's almost like, it's like the McCarthy trials. At the beginning, you have to remember something. When the McCarthy trials started in the 50s, a majority of the American people were for them. They were not, the American people did not hate them at the beginning. They were for them. But they went too far. What happened was eventually these communists, and I do believe to this day, a lot of these people who were accused to be communists in the United States were. I don't know what that means, if they should have done anything should have been done about it, but I think that they were. These people who were being investigated, actually, in the end, it was so forceful that the victims, these people actually started getting sympathy from the American people. And it was like the McCarthy hearings overstayed their welcome. To the point, probably, where there were some communists here who were communist spies that actually ended up getting sympathy from the American people just because McCarthy and others went after them so hard. You have to be very careful in stuff like this. This is what I worry about regarding this particular topic and making Hillary Clinton the focus of it with this war on women and her double standard. See, when you can talk about a topic, well, how would you put it? I mean, in the third person, where you just make it a topic for all Democrats. You make the topic, you don't have to actually mention any person's name, but you just pull out the FBI statistics. Here's where the crimes happen in the United States. Here's where the rapes happen. Here's where the murders happen. Here's where Democrats live. Here's the areas where Democrats have controlled for decades. Wow, look at this coincidence. Where the crimes happen is where Democrats control the cities. The crimes happen where Democrats are in charge. You keep her name out of it, you keep his name out of it, and it's not so personal. And I think that kind of argument can go a much longer way, because then you don't run the risk of making somebody sympathetic. Whereas if you push Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton too hard on this, in this particular question, and I know there's There's even some state representative up in the Northeast who's following Hillary Clinton around, hammering her on this. There's going to be a point where her people will figure out a way to make her a sympathetic figure. There is a way, because we are making it so personal. And I know this sounds a little bit like what the politics of personal destruction. And we know the Clintons, if there's any couple who've specialized that in the last 30 years, it's been them. And maybe there's maybe a little bit too much of revenge going on here among conservatives. But I think that we have to keep in mind, once again, don't become fixated on her. Don't become fixated on him. Be fixated, if you want to be fixated, on the topic of conservatism and how to make the best argument. What is going to be a convincing argument? Something probably that isn't personal. Probably. Maybe. Once again, this goes back to me knowing that people tune into the show for the first time, maybe are listening to politics for the first time. They maybe don't even know to the extent of what Bill Clinton may or may not have done going back to the 90s, the 80s, and the 70s. Maybe where a person was born the year Bill Clinton got elected. Talked into them about Bill Clinton and what he did is like talking about what JFK, what he did while he was in the Oval Office. It's like talking to me about that. It just doesn't just translate. But when you can pull out current statistics about crime, current statistics about rape, current statistics about the areas of the country which Democrats control, that seems to me that goes a lot farther. So going back to the question, will Bill's sex life keep Hillary from the White House? I think the answer is no. And if you answer that question as being no, there's no reason to hound her on it. However, I can see a scenario where crime keeps her out of the White House. I can see that. Because of what I know the statistics are that are hard, black, and white, in contrast to all the innuendos. I'm sorry he's saying he did it, but all the innuendos that have gone on with Bill Clinton all these years. And in general, I think that your average American does want to stay out of a person's sex life. I think that's why Bill Cosby got away with it for so long. They just didn't want to bother with it. People might have heard some allegations that he did this, he did that. You know what? They went to see a stand-up routine anyway. We have to keep that in mind. We have to keep these women had maybe didn't know they all each existed, but they've been knew about this and probably had told some people for a while. Other people find out about it. Bill Cosby still continued to be a popular guy for decades. You've got to keep that in mind before you go too hard at Hillary and Bill regarding him and her double standard regarding all of it. Just remember that. Remind you can find my books at Amazon.com. Just do a search for Edward Dentzel. You can download them to your Kindle in a matter of moments. You can email me at edwarddentzel@reagan.com. Follow me on Twitter, Dentzel domain, all one word, no space in between. EdwardDentzel.com is my website. EdwardDentzel.com/book is where you can download the first chapter of my next book, which won't be coming out till later this year. It's called The Comebacks. Would love you to read it. Just have to put in your email. You can find my show at Podbean, YouTube, and SoundCloud the day after they play on Red State Talk Radio. You can also find me on Facebook and on LinkedIn. You can also find my shows in the iTunes Store in the podcast section. But that's the end of the show. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Good night. You've been listening to the Dentzel domain on Red State Talk Radio.